right, Brian.
All right, Steve, forget al-Qaeda or chemical weapons. The #1 threat to our nation's security could come from the computer keyboard. At least that's what keeps people in charge of our security up at night.
Our country will, for example, at some point face a major cyber event that will have a serious effect on our lives, our economy, and the everyday functioning of our society.
We can add cyber and financial to the list of weapons being used against us, and such attacks can be deniable and non-attributable.
And cyber is now at a point where the technology is there to cripple a country.
Well, so what is being done? And could this be the way in which Syria responds if we hit them before this month's out? Joining us right now is Tennessee Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn in studio. Congresswoman, how concerned are those in Washington about the Syrian electronic army?
We are very concerned about that. And not only about Syria, but you look at what is happening with Russia, with China, with some of the rogue networks, with some
Snowden.
Yes, and you know that there is a threat there. Brian, what we know is that within the past 5 years, cyber attacks on this country, our critical infrastructure, on companies here, it's increased 650%.
Right.
It costs business and government about $400 billion a year in cyber attacks.
And just so you know how capable the Syrian electronic army is, they hacked into the New York Times website,
Right.
They hacked into the Marine website and give their messages there. Haven't done a lot of damage, but just essentially said, you see what we can do. This might be their Lockerbie response. How Gaddafi responded to our Lockerbie bombing by blowing up that jet. That might be how they respond to our cruise missiles, which seem heading their way.
Right. And in the clip that you showed, you saw Secretary Napolitano talking about the expectation that that will happen. So we are continually trying to work through it and say, well, what are you doing with it? We've passed a bill in the House, CISPA, and the Senate hasn't taken it up. We have my legislation, the Secure IT Act, that would put provisions in place that give individuals and companies the ability to work with government. Share that info.
Now, you're going to head back to Washington.
Yes.
You're going to be asked to make a major vote. Right now, do you lean yes or no towards giving the president the support on a Syrian response to the chemical attack?
I lean no.
Why?
I think that there are plenty of questions still unanswered. I want to hear the intel briefing. Plus, what has happened? This administration and this president has made major cuts into our military budget. How do you plan to backfill that? We are constantly asking our military to do more with less. And as we go through this repositioning to Asia, as we look at how we have fumbled with the drawdown in Iraq, Afghanistan, Benghazi, Egypt, there are lots of unanswered questions.
I watched Congressman Duncan go at it with Secretary of State Kerry yesterday, and he brought this up. He says, you guys essentially have accountability issues when you look at what happened with James Rosen, the IRS investigation, Fast and Furious, and then Secretary of State Kerry went off the charts, angry, wouldn't let him finish. Are those things related in your mind to Syrian support?
Of course they're related because it speaks to leadership or lack thereof. And what America wants to see is a commander-in-chief who can define the problem, define the mission, lay out the strategy, and say this is the exit. At this point, we have not seen that. And I think that not only are members of Congress, but our constituents, the American people, want to see the president do that.
I just found it interesting that John Boehner says, I'm voting for it, but you have not gotten a call. No one's trying to whip your vote into shape. So he says, I'll vote for it, but I'm not going to work for it and make my Republicans get
Well, and I think that's where people are waiting to see the president lay out this plan and show the leadership that is necessary for that, leadership that has been vacant on other issues. And also, Brian, you know, where he doesn't make the decision, then he says he's coming to Congress, and then he tries to blame Congress with the red line.
Right. That was an interesting little remark.
Yes, it
yesterday.
was.
All right. It's always great to see you, Congresswoman.
Good to see you.
Thanks so much
you.
for coming in.
Absolutely.
2 minutes now before the bottom of the hour.